All right. you know, you know what I love about um, bold titles. I always love bold titles because people watch this like, okay, tell me how tell me how this explains everything in one poem. It's not that it explains everything in one poem, because for me, actually, my interpretation of Hegel is this is how love continues, how love continues to fail. And the phenomenology of spirit is the rising through those stations, is the realizations of how love continues to fail. And it's because love continues to fail that makes love possible, that makes awareness possible, that makes knowledge possible, um, and so on. But I want, because I believe in the Hegel class with Cadell, somebody asked, well, is it possible like to get stuck at a station? I'm not even going to answer it. I'm going to answer it in the poem. And I want this poem to be that very source of reflection. Okay. That very source of reflection. This just one poem, even though the prophet itself is like I would say an entire poem. I would dare say it's an entire poem itself, like just one poem. But there's a section where um, Gibran is answering through a character, a very spiritual character, is answering a question about love. And so I will kind of give you guys those answers through this character that Gibran had constructed. So I will read it like this. Then said Alamitra, speak to us of love. And he raised his head and looked upon the people, and there fell a stillness upon them. And with a great voice he said, when love beckons to you, follow him, though his ways are hard and steep, and when his wings enfold you, yield to him. Though the sword hidden among his pinions may wound you, and when he speaks to you, believe in him, though his voice may shatter your dreams, as the north wind lays waste to the garden. For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so is he for your pruning. Right? So start thinking about the sort of the rising of consciousness through these stages. Even as he ascends to your height and caresses your tender branches that quiver in the sun, so shall he descend to your roots and shake them in their clinging to the earth. Right? So it's just funny how this, I think this poem is like so perfect to explain any of this, because it really shows you that if you want to, it it almost shows you that if you really want to fully submit to love, that love itself will yank you out of your roots and shake you, right? And to continue on, it says this: like sheaves of corn, he gathers you unto himself. He threshes you to make you naked. He sifts you to free you from your husks. He grinds you to whiteness. He kneads you until you are pliant. And then he assigns you to his sacred fire, that you may become sacred bread for God's sacred feast. Um, all these things shall love do unto you, that you may know the secrets of your heart. Um, and in that knowledge become a fragment of life's heart. But if in your fear you would seek only love's peace and love's pleasure, then it is better for you that you cover your nakedness and pass out of love's threshing floor into the seasonless world where you shall laugh, but not all of your laughter. This is very important. And weep, but not all of your tears. Um, so this takes me back to like Hegel's chapter on self-consciousness, where it's like you really need this full, complete fear. You can't have this half-assed type of fear. And then here to go further on, love gives not but itself and takes not but from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love. When you love, you should not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And think not you can direct the course of love, for love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. So it's actually really interesting, this whole thing about if love finds you worthy, it directs your course. In Kojev's introduction to Hegel, Kojev actually makes this really nice point about Hegel advertises for this kind of like, I'm going to be very careful here, but he kind of advertises for like this almost passivity that is active, if that makes any sense. And really what it is that if you are really fully submitting to love as a bondsman, what that happens is that very love itself will direct your course, right? But the funny thing is, the very paradox is that people get attached to those loves that the bondman feels. He gets attached to those loves. And so he can get stagnant on that because he is forgetting. So what it requires is this stepping back and letting go. Because it's very tricky about falling in love is that you instantly want to direct its course. But it's only when you let go that love directs its course for you, that allows you to proceed to the next level of awareness. So basically you go through this death, right? Like I love this part right here where it says, he grinds you to whiteness. He kneads you until you are pliant, right? So to continue on with the poem, it says, love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desires, let these be your desires, to melt and be like a running brook that sings its melody to the night, to know the pain of too much tenderness, to be wounded by your own understanding of love. For me, this is exactly the whole point of Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, right? This idea of matching notion with object. When consciousness sort of runs into this error where notion doesn't match, where the notion doesn't match with the object, right? This is the perfect line. To be wounded by your own understanding of love. And then to proceed with the poem further, it says, and to bleed willingly and joyfully, to wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving, to rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy, to return home at evening tide with gratitude, and then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. This is the, for me, this is, even though Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit gets specific with its stations and rising of consciousness, I believe this whole poem exemplifies exemplifies its very like whole process that repeats in order to go to the next station, right? So basically, like once you return home, right? I'll read the last part again. Once you return home at evening tide with gratitude, and then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved in your heart and a song of praise upon your lips, right? It's almost like this is when you can finally go past to the other station. To be, because it ends with thankfulness. Notice how it ends with thankfulness after through this whole series of what love has done to you, right? It has needed you. It has like basically, just made you pliant. You could say like abused you, and you've kind of gone through this death of just like you don't even understand love anymore, and everything kind of gets put. You're wounded by your own understanding, essentially, until finally, once you. It's interesting, right? Because it says to rest at the noon hour and meditate love's ecstasy, to return home at evening tide with gratitude, um, which to me it's so beautiful. Um, it it really shows you like this whole process is how love continues to fail, and it's only when you're thankful at the end of this process that you are going to find yourself in the next station, right? um, that you after you've gone you're thankful for your death. It's not enough because see, I think what can kind of make some people stuck at a stage two is when they do realize that they're going through a death, but then they come out bitter, right? Which doesn't allow you to go to the next station, the next awareness of consciousness. Like you're just bitter about this death. You're not thankful about it. You don't see, you didn't quite learn the lesson of it. Like, and it's funny because it makes me think of, is it, my Master Eckhart, where he says, the only prayer that I will ever say is, thank you, God. Um, right. It's what, and it's funny because I feel like there's this weird paradox here about work, where actually it's realizing that it's this sort of like the work is the dying, like the work is letting love do its things to you, like basically shattering all your illusions constantly. And it's not only till you're thankful that you're able to find yourself in the next level of consciousness, and the next level of the station. It's not until you're thankful for it. um, I've I've gone through this with my own life. Like I've oh my god, I've gone through so many. I don't want to say like so many stations, but like I've gone through so many like moments in my life. Like, what's funny is every time I've had a woman like hurt my feelings, it's pushed my consciousness up higher, because what it does, I've always fallen back into myself, and I end up becoming more spiritual than I was before, right? Or more religious or so on. But I realized also that it was not enough to strictly just do like this heavy religiosity, that you needed a sort of deeper understanding, and you couldn't go through any of these process coming out bitter. So there is this aspect of like gratitude, which is funny because it actually makes me think of Heidegger, like this aspect of like care. um, you need this aspect of like gratitude, because I think this is what will freeze you in a station. Like you can die, you can go through the process of dying, but it's not until you have this realization of gratitude as love is doing something to you, which is like the real paradoxical part I feel like about doing this work. Because remember, what is it? Hegel says self-consciousness is desire, is like the movement of desire, right? But which is fucking perfect, because remember, it's when we direct the course of desire that we fall into the trap. It's only when, as Gibran says, oh God, if I can find it. Sorry, guys. I did not expect to say this one again. It's only when, oh, Jesus. So when Hegel says that self-consciousness is desire, is this movement of desire, right? The reason why we get stuck at a station is because we try to direct the course of desire. And oh my God, dude, I cannot find it. But, and then, so bringing it back to what Gibran says, right? For love, if it finds you worthy, direct your course, right? So you're gonna, and that's the funny part about doing the work, because like the work is almost like a letting go. It's a dying, because when we go back to what Hegel had said previously about self-consciousness is a desire, it's the movement of desire. It's when we mistake the movement of desire as ourselves, and that we try to direct the movement of desire, that we can remain stuck at whatever level of consciousness that is. It's only until we realize that it is not us that directs the course, right? For example, he says, when he says right here, for love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. And it's funny because this is exactly where we find our freedom. It's a very paradox. It doesn't make any sense, but it's like that very paradoxical thing where it's like, when love directs your course, do you find your freedom? And so that's why Hegel's always doing this, this back and forth with returning back to the self. Because when you make a mistake, when you make an error, the reason why that error exists is because you have tried to direct a course rather than letting love direct your course, which love, as it directs its course, as Gibran says, love is sufficient unto love. So, and that it doesn't want to be possessed or possesses. So it's almost like there's this infinitude in it, this motion of infinitude, like I feel like that Hegel was talking about in the very beginning, where the moment we try to make any claim to it, we're going to find ourselves at a specific station within Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. The moment we try to make claim to anything, we're going to find ourselves at a specific station, and we have to go through this kind of dying and thankfulness, because I feel like it's, and this is the very important part of Nietzsche too. It's like, you have to realize that it's not just about dying, is that it's very easy to die and feel resentful about your death, which of course will then restart your same like level. You know what I mean? Like there's, I think there's aspects to dying, like as in a video game, where if you don't die the right way, the level repeats itself, right? It's not until you can die the right way that you can proceed to the next level. And dying the wrong way is to die like a man of resentment, which this is why I feel like it's very important to bring Nietzsche into this conversation about this dying. Like you can't be a man of resentment. If you're gonna die, be thankful for it. And then once you're thankful for it, you can go to the next station. Don't hold on to this sort of resentment because all you're doing is restarting the level. Like you didn't die the right way. And I think it's very important that we realize that as individuals going through Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, right? We have to understand that there is a point where when we're dying, and when we realize that we're dying, that we have to be like thankful. That's like the most and it's funny because like that is the most passive part about it, is being thankful for your dying, letting love direct its course, direct you. But because that means fully submitting to love. That means being the bondsman to the highest degree possible. And then there you find your freedom. But it's only when you become resentful and not thankful, or you become possessive, or you decide to direct the course yourself, that we remain at these specific stages of Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, whether it be specific bondsman relationships or so on. This is what happens when we're not thankful for our dying, or we try to direct the course of what is happening. So anyways, that's really it. There's much to, and so that's why in a very broad brush, I paint the Phenomenology of Spirit as love proving itself over and over again that it fails, that it's going to fail you, because whatever your conception of love is, it's going to fail, because it's going to constantly put you to that death, because obviously you don't understand what love is, And in my opinion, love is a real kind of knowing. It's when we start trying to direct this course that it's going to murder us. But it's important that when it does murder us, that we're thankful for it. But other than that, I'm just repeating myself. So I will stop there. Let me see, Ian. It kind of seems to me like the resentment felt after a moment of denial is kind of a rejection of the pain of love. Yeah. No, that's exactly it. Yep, that's it. Exactly it. All right. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, that is exactly it. That pain you feel after the rejection of love is exactly it. But it's funny because when we say that love rejects us, it's such a one-sided understanding. Because why would love okay, so there's a book I would love everybody to read. It's called Neil's Line. And it's basically about a man going through these series of lovers and how it continuously fails. And what's so funny is that there's a scene in this book where a philosopher is just like on his freaking knees to this woman. And the woman says, if only you would love me as I am and not treat me like a god, you wouldn't be going through this right now, And it's such a good freaking line, man, because and it's such a perfect example of even like the bonds lordsman relationship as well, because this philosopher, as much as he's thinking and reasoning and everything else, is that the moment when he encounters love, he falls apart, and he doesn't even know how to like get himself together, and he raises her up to such a impossible heights that the woman says herself that like, you did this to yourself. You made me a god by doing what you do. And by you making me a god, you refuse to see me as I am. So I feel like there's theological complications and implications with this as well, right? Where it's like whatever your understanding of God is, it's going to crash and burn, right? Because there's that aspect of like, actually, you are imposing something on God that can't possibly be known, that needs to let itself arise by its own self. And that, this is right here, this is the example of your idolatry, right? And how shallow it is. So I think Neil's line, like that whole book, is such a good freaking book, because my God, it's such a sad book. It's such a sad book, but it really throws you in the woes of this man, just grappling with his lovers, his life, his unhappy self, and it's such a good book, because it's at the end of it, it's really about dying that difficult death, and a lot of things is that, and this is why I like phenomenology, because phenomenology, what is the purpose of phenomenology, right? The purpose of phenomenology is so that you see things as they are. But, right, so if you take this embodiment of a woman, and if you're just like worshiping her, and she says, look, I'm going to destroy you because you still refuse to see me as I am, I feel like that is the whole symbolism of phenomenology, that you need to have this sort of relationship where you're willing to die because you are willing to see what is it that is as she says she is. What is this as she is, so I feel like phenomenology has that, and this is why I like it, is because phenomenology has implied dying in it. Has implied dying in it. And you have to be able to die in order to see things as they are. There's aspects of you that you have to grapple with in order to see things as they are. And how that manifests is always through the other. It's always through the other about how that manifests. And so this is why I love the novel Neil's Line, because it shows how love continues to fail and how we continuously fail to see it as it is, as it arises. But hopefully we're thankful with our deaths and not people of resentment, and can kind of move forward and grant ourselves a new encounter with love, where again, we're going to fail, and we're going to be shown that we don't understand. But the funny part is that this exact impossibility is what allows love to exist in the first place, right? Like, that painting of, like, was it, I think Michelangelo did it, and Khalil had it in his class. It's like God and man just like this. Yeah. You need to always be like this. And that's the reason why love exists, is because it's never going to be like this, but it's always going to be like this. And we need that. We need that almost, like, I almost touched you kind of ecstasy. So we need that, for me, this is the essence of love right here. This is the pinnacle of love, is maintaining this exact thing, not touching each other, just this right here. The failing of love without touching, but because you fail to touch, this is the exact possibility of it. And in this course, this gap is this dying. You're falling through this gap over and over again, only to find yourself on the opposite side every single time. I mean, how else? So anyways, it's funny because I learned that through a novel. I learned that through a novel and through poetry, through Rilke, through Gibran. So when I read Hegel, it's like, yeah, I feel like it really is the phenomenology of love failing over and over again. My understanding of whatever I desire, it's going to fail. It's going to fail. And I have to be, the work is going through that death and coming out thankful. But yeah, thanks, Ian. He said, dude. But I don't know. If you guys have any questions, I guess. I mean, there's 3 people watching, so I'm kind of confused. That's about it, though. I don't have much to say. Okay, let me see. You said, isn't it Hegel who points out that the split of God into God of beyond in Christ is what opens up the space for love that wasn't necessarily emphasized in the Old Testament? I don't know for sure. Actually, I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, because I haven't finished the Phenomenology of Spirit, so. But there's a lot of sources that kind of point to that. Like there's Ibn Arabi with his mysticism, that kind of. Okay, so to kind of help some people understand is that Ibn Arabi actually divides like 3 aspects of love. The first one is the natural, where it's like you're strictly like your self-satisfaction. The second one is spiritual, which is basically the Lord and bondsman relationship. But I like to call this the beloved and the faithful relationship. And what's funny is that even though Ibn Arabi's categories are so broad, is that you can kind of stuff Hegel's specific rises of consciousness into those categories. And then there's divine love, which would fall into exactly what you're saying, Ian, where it's this eternal exchange between God and man, where it's like God's action, like man's action is God's action, and God's action is man's action. Like it is that almost, it's a bi-unity. That's basically what it is. It's a bi-unity, but there's clearly because it has to have that space because there needs to be a dialectic. If there isn't a dialectic, some type of negativity, then love can't exist. Like, and this is why I like Henry Corbin's notion of like a pathetic God, which he borrows from the Iranian Sufis. It's this pathetic God means it's a God of pathos. It's a sad and divine yearning God that wants to see himself through the other. But the thing is, man himself has to actualize himself in order so God can see himself through the other. It's kind of like polishing up a mirror. Like it can't just happen. So you have to polish yourself up through the mirror. You have to become a polished mirror for God, essentially, in order so that he can continue to love himself. But that's kind of like the more mystical side, right? Like that's the very extreme notion of like there is only God. There's only one God, like literally one God. Like there's nothing else. Everything else is basically God's imagination and creation from his imagination and so on. But anyways, I think, in my opinion, I think Ibn Arabi is very helpful. Like I can fit Hegel's system in Ibn Arabi, and also fit some Ibn Arabi in Hegel. And for me, it just makes much clarity and so on. But of course, that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. I know I went on a tangent, but But there is something to say though about, because I think somebody in class brought about like, oh, the images. I think it was Isaiah. Um, Ibn Rabi basically says like, okay, so the world of imagination, the world of images. Ibn Rabi says that the highest image is the image of the divine woman. Um, and once you realize that that image is like a part of you as a sort of self-consciousness, then you finally reach that divine love. You reach that divine love of the internal dialogue. Um, and that gets into like really complicated things where it's because Ibn Rabi believes that the feminine encompasses both the active and the passive, and that the masculine can only occupy one or the other. Um, so it's very interesting because when you look at the very normative theological rising of like the Bible and stuff, like God created Adam, but then, but before that, right? So God says, I created man in my own image, right? Check this out, right? Adam comes into existence, but then God pulls Eve out of Adam and it's for him, right? And it's funny because this interpretation is always like seemed as like sexist and misogynistic and so on. But if you connect it to Lacan and the sexual non-relation and so on, Eve, Eve is the highest image for Adam, so that way he can have a dialogue with God. um, but you know, yeah, that's and I feel like a lot of the theological books and stuff like that just really helped me understand Hegel. So I use poetry and I use theology. I use the symbolism. Again, I'm a very like poetic thinker, so I can't. It's very hard for me to read Hegel just as Hegel represents it. It's very hard. It's very hard to wrap my mind around it. It's not until I'm reading these like sort of very spiritual religious texts, I'm like, oh, that I can connect that to that. I can do this with that. And then all of a sudden it's like reading Hegel is like a fucking acid trip. Because I literally experienced that like earlier this week. I just felt like a freaking acid trip. I was like, oh my God, I understand what's going on to some degree. But okay, that's again. Is there any more questions or something? I don't even know. Ian, glad to actually see you in the class, Ian. I know that I haven't been there. I, unfortunately, like work prevented me the first time from joining in the actual discussion of Khalil's class. What was the book that you mentioned earlier? Oh, I'll type it for you. It's Neil's line. It's by Jake. It's like Jacob Peterson Jacobson. Honestly, it's probably one of those underrated classic novels that very few people know about. I personally fell in love with the novel because it's about a man that is going through a series. He's going through a series of lovers. He is going through the agony of friendship, the agony of inspiration, his rejection of religion, and so on. God, for me, I love it. I love that novel. I literally finished it somehow, but Ian's like, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, it's honestly so great, so great. And I would also recommend reading the Prophet by Gibran. I think that this book will also help you kind of understand Hegel too, in a different way, in a very symbolic way. And so on. There's just things that Gibran says about death that is kind of like very interesting. And so on. So yeah, I think that's it. But yeah, nice to see you, Ian. in the class and stuff. And I know you follow me on Instagram too. So, all right. I did not expect to talk this long. I don't know. This was unplanned. Well, yeah, it was completely unplanned. But all right. I will catch you guys later. Thank you guys for watching. And, if you guys have any questions, I'm pretty sure you guys follow me on other media and stuff. All right. Take care. Bye.